Our culture is a mess. Our society is in shambles. Families are breaking apart. We find devastation around us. I don't mean to be pessimistic here, because I'm pretty much an optimistic guy. But you know, you just look around. Any Catholic who has a good informed conscience would certainly agree that our culture is in a incredibly problematic situation right now. You can help us understand why we got into this mess and how we got into it. I have a cousin who teaches in an inner city school, and he's constantly complaining to me about the students' behavior, about how terrible the situation is at home, their home life, how their homework and their schoolwork is just as denigrated to just barely trying to get them to understand basic tenets of the English language. He's an English teacher. And I'm looking and I'm listening to him and I'm saying, this is the aftermath.
It is.
This is the aftermath of what you have to teach us about how this happened to our culture and society.
Right. I call it a moral tsunami, and I'm not talking about abortion. Okay, abortion is the symptom of this moral tsunami. It's the destructive force of it, but the moral tsunami is contraception. And let me just mention that the organization that I work with is Human Life International, and we are certainly opponents of abortion. Our founder, Father Paul Marx, in the 70s and 80s, was working against abortion, and not only in this country but all over the world. But Father Marx fundamentally is a priest whose life is identified by another encyclical of our church called Humanae Vitae. Humanae Vitae was a document issued in 1968 by Pope Paul VI. This is a document that Catholics may or may not have heard of, probably haven't heard of because it hasn't been preached in 40 years. But,
but you want to talk more about that later.
That's right, we can talk about that later. But the reality is that here's a church's very clear and consistent teaching, which he didn't invent in 1968, he just reiterated in the advent of the modern birth control pill and the aggressive powerful economic force and international movement of birth control. And Pope Paul VI made a few predictions about what would happen if societies in general, and married couples in particular, accepted birth control as a lifestyle. Okay, he said number one, and these are the famous Humanae Vitae prophecies. Okay, number one, that there would be a general lowering of morality. Has anybody noticed the general lowering of morality in our society here 40 years after that? In fact, that was the same year that Hollywood knocked out its own self-censorship code. You know, we had the degradation of the movie industry from that point on. You know, it's really, really interesting, and kind of the timing of that in the ecclesiastical and secular worlds, how they corresponded there.
That was a self-imposed restriction from Hollywood?
It was, yeah. Yeah, it was called the Hayes Production Code. And it was actually written in the 30s by a Catholic priest.
Wow.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
And so it was generally the Catholic ethic on you know, evaluating movies and their content, you know. And Hollywood said, we're not taking this, you know, so they just wiped it out. And because it was voluntary, it wasn't imposed as a censorship by a government, they could just dispense with it overnight, which is what they did. In 1965, the movie of the year that won the Best Picture was Sound of Music. Okay, in 1968 it was Easy Rider, you know, an X-rated film. Or Midnight Rider.
Man for All Seasons was in there too, wasn't it? I think it got Best Picture in '67 or something, or '66.
Something like that, before the changeover.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
Yeah, it's incredible. But the first thing that Humanae Vitae pointed out was that if you allow birth control in your society as a general thing, you're going to feel the effects of it morally in your society. It'll not just have personal effects, but it'll have social effects. Okay, secondly, the Pope said that if birth control is practiced largely in your society, men will cease to appreciate the unique gifts and uniqueness of women, okay, and to take care of their health and well-being, and to be concerned about their overall well-being as a woman, okay, because why? The main part of a woman's psyche and self-understanding is the fact that can potentially be the bearer of a child, and the channel through which life comes into the world. Okay, what happens when you just cut all that off? Then you don't have to worry about that aspect of her being, you know. So it's degrading to women, in other words. And then the Pope said something very interesting, which was picked up by a guy like Father Marks, because he could see this on an international scale. He said, if a society accepts birth control as a general lifestyle reality for them, then birth control can be really a weapon that powerful governments can use against less powerful governments in the world. And thus was born the whole population control movement, you know, right after that. I mean, it was at that same time that the Rockefeller foundations and some of the other powerful governments were working with, or powerful foundations were working with our government to begin a population control policy. So yeah, the Humanae Vitae was really prophetic in that sense.
Didn't he say there would be more infidelity in marriages,
Absolutely.
More fornication,
Absolutely.
more divorce,
Absolutely.
and then more venereal diseases
Yeah.
would spring into being? Like you said, it was a prophetic document that predicted the big mess that happened as a result of artificial birth control.
Yeah, look at it this way. What holds a family together? Let's say the family is the fundamental unit of a society. So in other words, it's the cell, like the cells of the body. This is what the society is made up of. If you start destroying the cells of the body, you know, if half of your body has cancer, you're in pretty bad shape. Okay, the body eventually dies. The body politic is the same way. If you start destroying the fundamental cells of your society, society as a whole is in trouble if this spreads like a cancer. Well, what holds a family together? A marriage. What does contraception do? It enters right into the heart of that marriage and divides husband and wife. Sometimes physically with the barrier method, you know, the methods that come between husband and wife, and sometimes chemically in dividing a woman from her fertility and dividing a man's responsibility for his natural obligation to generate and to take care of life. So when you strike right at the heart of a family, which is a marriage, and you start breaking those things up, then you start breaking families apart. When you start breaking families apart, you spread this cancer into all of society, and you might not feel it for a while. You know, here we are 40 years after the advent of the birth control pill, and we're starting to see a lot of, or put two and two together to see the degradation of our society, and starting to kind of think back, well, what could be the cause of all this? And I put my finger right on that contraceptive pill, that contraceptive mentality that destroys the relationship between man and woman. Documents like Humanae Vitae and preachers like you and me, we go at that, not to condemn anybody, but to show them another way, you know, to open their minds up to the truth.